Jeremy Birmingham from LedmanRoad.com joins us now in Birm. Is there any reason to take any stock into what happened last week for Ohio State at Rutgers? A dominating win, but some people were concerned.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I think the fact is Ohio State was up 42-7 after the first drive of the third quarter. At that point, sort of yanked everyone out, and I think they could have named their score if they had chosen to. They were up 21-0 after 6 minutes and looked to be as efficient and as dominant as they have been all year. But in a game against Rutgers, knowing what's on the schedule coming up with Penn State and Michigan and the Big Ten Championship and the potential playoff and all that stuff, you don't risk anything in that situation. You get the heck out of New Jersey, which they did. You get out of there healthy, which they did, and now you turn the focus. And
14 of those 21 points, it did come off of turnovers, so that certainly helped the Rutgers cause. Now, we heard quite a bit today from Ryan Day about equating talent. That this is going to be the first time Ohio State's facing equal talent, and when talent is equal, it comes back to preparation.
Talent is oftentimes the deciding factor in a college football game, but when you're playing against a program like Penn State that has a lot of players who are comparable in what they're able to do athletically, what it comes down to, as Day talked about today, is preparation, coaching, game plan. In Ohio State, that's one area where this season we don't know really what that's going to come down to. We haven't seen any other instance this season where there's been that comparable talent. And you know, the Buckeyes are favored by 18 or 19 points, depending on who you ask out in Las Vegas. So there may not be a thought that they're comparable in talent to Penn State because that's a 3-touchdown win. Yeah. But you know, Penn State has some really good athletes. The Buckeyes are obviously not taking them lightly. They are the best team the Buckeyes will have played this year without question. And you could see it today talking to Ryan Day, talking to the players that we got to talk to. The focus is squarely on Penn State. There's no look ahead to Michigan. There's no look ahead to anything else.
Yeah, in fact, several of the players are kind of taken aback when they realized that this would be the seniors would be their last game at the Horseshoe. One of those talented players for Penn State that there is a question about is wide receiver KJ Hamler. We've seen his speed. We saw what he did last year against Ohio State. We saw what he did against what Penn State did against Michigan with Hamler earlier this year. He is hurt. We don't have details, and of course, James Franklin, as he should, isn't going to give any details, so we don't know if KJ Hamler is going to go. If he does go, he's going to be huge, but if he's not 100%, that's a big help for the Buckeyes.
Yeah, it seemed like a concussion issue based on what Saturday looked like when you're watching the Indiana-Penn State game, but if it is a concussion, if it's a minor thing, then they held him out to prepare him for Ohio State. Obviously, I think that's where Chase Young's return to the field for Ohio State becomes that much more important because so much of the Penn State offense is predicated on this idea that you push the ball down the field to KJ Hamler, try to get him in a matchup against the safety. If you don't necessarily have the time to set that up when you have Chase Young on the other side of the football, which Ohio State obviously will get him back. Who knows about Jonathan Cooper? Who knows about anyone else? But Chase Young being back helps neutralize that if Hamler is, in fact, ready to go. I would assume he is going to be ready to go, but he's also not the only weapon that Penn State has on their offensive side of the football. They don't know about true freshman running back Noah Cain. He may be back. Sean Clifford has proven himself as a pretty adept runner this year. I think you'll see Penn State do a lot of trying to get Clifford out of the pocket, roll him around. They remember what Trace McSorley did on the ground against Ohio State in the last couple of years, and I think you'll see them try to manipulate the defense of the Buckeyes to open up those running lanes for Clifford, and then hope that sets up the deep ball for Hamler or for Jahan Dotson or anybody else.
And Jeff Hafley, defensive coordinator, did some interesting things to say about how Maryland and Rutgers tried to attack Ohio State without Chase Young, and that wasn't necessarily successful, particularly against Maryland, but Penn State's talent's much better than Maryland and Rutgers' talent.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first test this year for the Buckeye defense where we're really going to see if what our eyes are telling us, that this Buckeye team is much faster sideline to sideline, much better at reading and reacting to quick slants and to screens and that kind of stuff. I mean, all year long, people have been trying to run screens against Ohio State, and the Buckeyes have blown them up. We'll see this year, or this weekend, I apologize, with Penn State, how the Buckeye speed really matches up, because Penn State will be much faster in making that happen. And then they have the best tight end in the Big Ten, Pat Freiermuth, the sophomore, who is a big-time player, and how he works into the game will be interesting because, you know, they're probably looking for ways to exploit the matchup, maybe with Tough Borland, with Freiermuth. And then, you know, again, we're getting back to injuries. Is Baron Browning going to be back? Is those sorts of things going to swing around so that the Buckeyes will be better suited to stop it? So it's a very interesting matchup.
Other side of the ball, Justin Fields coming off his first 300-yard passing game as a Buckeye, and this is a Penn State defense that's pretty good against the rush, but they've certainly been susceptible against the pass.
Yeah, and they're also susceptible against the quarterback run, which is, you know, pretty different They're one of the best in the country stopping the running back, but they're not that great stopping the quarterback on the move. And I think this will be the first weekend where we see Ohio State really implement Justin Fields as a part of the game plan as a runner, which will allow the Buckeyes to then open up with the play action. And that's how you beat this Penn State defense, is getting them in the back half. So Penn State's front seven defensively is excellent. Micah Parsons is one of the best athletes in the country. Probably going to be an All-American as a sophomore, and then you can count him as one as a junior next year too, pretty much. So you know that they have some guys out there that can really run to the football. And for Ohio State, it's about misdirection. It's about finding ways to exploit the matchups in the secondary. And that's where the Buckeyes obviously have a lot of receivers who are capable of doing that, but that means they have to keep Justin Fields on his feet.
Among the interesting backstories of this matchup is their recruiting battles. The fact that Ohio State, Penn State recruit a lot of the same kids. You mentioned Micah Parsons. He very easily could have been an Ohio State Buckeye. Once upon a time, Justin Fields was a commit to Penn State, so that's going to bring another level to this game.
Yeah, Justin had committed to Penn State well before he blew up nationally back in the summer of 2017, and once that happened, you sort of knew he wasn't going to end up there, even though he told us today James Franklin was blindsided. I'm not sure how he could have been. Everyone in recruiting circles knew that was coming, but what you look for is understanding that they are recruiting a lot of the same players should help underscore the point here that this is a matchup full of comparable athletes, which is, again, the first time the Buckeyes have seen that this year, and I think that makes for a very interesting matchup.
Ohio State, 7 home games this year, all but 2 of those were noon games. And when this game was announced as a noon start, there was a lot of people upset about it. One of the conspiracy theories is this is somehow Fox's way to hurt Ohio State recruiting because recruits hate noon games, when Ryan Day kind of dispelled that a little bit today.
Well, I'm not sure Fox has any vested interest in hurting Ohio State recruiting.
Well, because Urban Meyer's going to go to USC and take all the 5 stars with him.
Sure. Fox also owns the Pac-12 and the Big Ten, essentially. So I think they want as much talent as they can get on the sideline in Columbus, and so far so good for the Buckeyes. But the reality here is that nobody really loves noon games when it comes to the people in the stadium, except for the players and the coaches and the media, right? So everyone else hates it. It's a noon game. It's not a 3:30 game, which is what if you want atmosphere, a little bit later in the day would certainly be good. The Big Ten prohibits night games in conference this late in the season anyway, so it wasn't going to be a night game ever, and nobody should have ever thought it was going to be an 8 o'clock start or a 7:30 start. But, the atmosphere here is about who they're playing, not when they're playing. The Penn State game 2 years ago, Michigan the last couple of years has been as loud as it's ever been in the stadium at Ohio State, and I don't think the atmosphere will be any problem for the Buckeyes on Saturday.
Well, speaking of the atmosphere, B.B. Landers did mention that there are some guys on defense who haven't played in this type of atmosphere yet, and he was curious to see how they're going to respond because, let's face it, Ohio State-Penn State is the biggest rivalry for Ohio State in terms of on-field impact. There's nothing that's going to take away from the off-field impact of Ohio State-Michigan, but when it comes to the Big Ten East, it comes down to Ohio State and Penn State. It's been that way for the last 5 years, and there have been some epic matchups between these two teams over the last 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, the last 3 years, the game has been decided by a total of 5 points between these two schools, and you know what you're going to get. And for BB talking about the defensive guys not understanding this atmosphere, defense, that sort of fuels you, right? So it'll be very important for Ohio State fans, if you're one of those 105,000 in the stadium on Saturday, to make a lot of noise. And Ryan Day asked for that basically on Tuesday afternoon, saying we want you to make it as hard as possible for Penn State to do anything. And that will feed the defense, and that kind of juice is certainly what they're looking for at Ohio Stadium on Saturday.
Ryan Day wants a good start for the Buckeyes, but the fact of the matter is the last 3 years in this game, it's been who's finished strong. Each team has blown a fourth quarter lead in the last 3 years. Ohio State was up 10 points in the fourth quarter in 2016. Of course, at 2017, Penn State had the 15-point lead. Last year, Penn State was up 12 at home, couldn't close it out. So this game is important to start strong, but it's more important to finish strong.
Well, this is one of those instances where Ohio State is going to be tested because, as has been talked about ad nauseum, they haven't played a real 60-minute game this year. And so the expectation is that they will, and Ryan Day is certainly hoping that his players can do what he says and rely on their training to get them through it if that ends up being the case. But again, I don't know. Like, Vegas says this is a 19-point Ohio State favorite. Are we suffering from a recency bias that we expect this to be another nail-biter, or is Vegas calling it right? I mean, so it's sort of hard to see exactly how it plays out, but you know that you're going to have to come out of the gate swinging on Saturday if you're Ohio State. If the Buckeyes are as good as they think they are, as good as all of the polls and all of the rankings think they are, which is probably the best first 10 games of an Ohio State season in my lifetime, then they come out and throw a couple haymakers early and win this game comfortably. But again, recency bias suggests that may not be the case.
Buckeyes Nittany Lions, winner of this game in all likelihood goes to Indianapolis as the Big Ten East representative. Obviously, if Penn State should somehow probably trip up against Rutgers, that would change a little, throw a monkey wrench into it. But the fact is, if Ohio State wins on Saturday, they're going to Indy.
That's right. I mean, this is a de facto division championship game. Obviously, for Ohio State, this would be the third straight year of getting that opportunity. They're in a position to go to the college football playoff. They have every idea what's on the line this weekend. I guess in some ways, there's this argument that it's unfortunate they have to put Penn State and Michigan back-to-back. But in a way, I think it actually sets up nicely because you can't take your eye off the ball. You can't have comments like Shea Patterson made about, basically ignoring the fact that they have to play Indiana this week before playing Ohio State. I mean, you can't have that sort of lapse, and I think that's important for Ohio State considering the opportunity for a lapse that they had with Maryland and Rutgers before this.
You brought up Shea Patterson, Michigan coming off the win over Michigan State, and it's been suggested, and I think it's a pretty strong analogy, that the Ohio State-Penn State rivalry is much like the Michigan-Michigan State rivalry, with Penn State playing the role of Michigan State, Ohio State playing the role of Michigan, where this means a lot more to Penn State than it does to Ohio State. And Ohio State has, in recent history, outside of 2016, Ohio State has controlled this rivalry.
They found a way to win. I mean, that's the leap that you have to take, and James Franklin talked about it after last year's game. The leap you have to take from being a great program to being an elite program, it's not a huge jump, but it is a difficult jump to make regardless, and I think that Penn State is, as Franklin alluded to on Tuesday afternoon at his own press conference, they played Ohio State better than anybody else, but they're still falling short. And this is another opportunity for Penn State to try to assert their dominance as the Big Ten's best program. And Ohio State, Ryan Day, everything that's changed around here is one thing stays the same in the Big Ten. That's Ohio State is the standard bearer, and we'll see if they can maintain that on Saturday.
All right, thank you very much, Jeremy Birmingham from LettermanRow.com, as the Buckeyes and Nittany Lions will be the noon game Saturday in the shoe.